Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is May 19th, Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. Yeah, okay, fine. So what? Right? That's what you're asking. Well, okay. Nothing in particular. We're time for another show, of course. And, man, we're running around this morning trying to get things arranged as usual. I got to figure out a new morning routine to make these things just a little smoother. But, well, a couple of screw-ups with the music, but nothing that will really affect the outcome of the show. Plenty to talk about, of course, as always, tucked away in pocket and awaiting arrival on the river. Every time we say that Greg's got a raft of stories coming, I assume it's coming by water, right? I guess so. I don't know. For some reason, I just saw him tweeting a photo of a bunch of hippopotamuses. It's not hippopotami or anything stupid like that, is it? I don't know. Anyway, oh, yes, okay. And I guess in response to people trying to figure out whether the health care privacy law is, in fact, HIPAA or hippo or hippopapa or how many P's and how many A's in it. Okay, I get you. All right. Now I know why there's at least one hippopotamus, if not more, though there are clearly more. I just don't know how to say it in this photo. So we'll just state it that way. Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. Just one, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, all right. Well, whatever. Kagro in the Morning radio show live now, and just one tweet from Bill, not several. One per hippopotamus or anything like that. No rule on this sort of thing. What are we going to be working on today? Kagro X, according to this anyway, can confirm that the Trump empire is now under criminal investigation by the Attorney General of New York. That's true. I can. I won't, but I could. If I wanted to. I'll leave it up to someone else. I'll just read you the story of someone else confirming that that's the case. And if the whole family goes down, you're going to get a free t-shirt. It's an excellent deal, really. Quite honestly, all you have to do is vote for Democrats, I guess, as district attorneys, wherever they're applicable, at a ballot box near you, whether it's a drop box or any other kind, right? Okay. Plenty to catch up on. I mean, we might as well just jump into that one. I saw a lot of excitement on Twitter this morning for that news, and there's not that much to explain, except that, well, I could give you the headline over at the Washington Post. I think that'll really sum it up. I'm doing this for you so that you don't have to open the story and look at Donald Trump's face anymore, with the big puffy sunken eyes and the calamari lips, as people have described them, and the fake tan. Investigation of Trump Organization now exploring possible criminal conduct, New York Attorney General's office says, which is on the one hand exciting, and on the other hand, isn't that what you were doing? No. Well, technically, the nuance of the story tells us that these were non-criminal investigations up to this point, and that they still are, because all they're doing is now exploring possible criminal conduct. And honestly, there's nothing but criminal conduct from him and his family, so I guess it's a little bit of a letdown in that sense. But good news, I guess, that they are proceeding to a possible criminal phase. There was some other news that probably relates to that I picked up on this morning. Who was working this angle here? Zach Everson tweeting this morning, a long thread that he's been adding to for quite a long time, I guess. And let's see, what have we got here? Why did it start here? I'm not sure exactly why, but he writes for various outlets, but also maintains one of those newsletters that people like to read about instead of newspapers, I guess these days. It's got a Twitter address, 1100 Penn, like Pennsylvania Avenue. I don't know if that's where his offices are or whatever. But at any rate, why did it open this tweet from May of last year when instead I wanted to see what was being tweeted this morning? Oh, well, all right. For some reason, it clicked on this one. I guess this is the beginning of the thread. That's what it must be. Anyway, he's been following the saga of the Washington, D.C. hotel that Trump, what shall we say, leased from the General Services Administration and administered as his own. But his news is about the House Oversight Committee's investigation into the operations of the hotel. And of course, they have been after the financial reports for the hotel for some time. And the big news is that House Dems have finally got the Trump Hotel's monthly financial statements. Why? Because, why is it big news and why did they get it? With a Trump appointee no longer heading GSA, the agency has finally provided the House committee long sought after information about Trump's D.C. hotel's performance. After 11 requests, a House panel with oversight of Trump's D.C. hotel lease has obtained the business's financial statements. What changed? This was the first request after the leaseholder of that government-owned building, remember it's in the old post office pavilion, was no longer president. So was he pulling strings and obstructing, well, let's say oversight, if not exactly justice at that point during the past 11 requests? Your guess is as good as mine, as long as the guess is yes. So in that case, we're all going to be fine. And let's see what Greg's got here. Greg's all ready to... How's the computer coming along this morning, Greg?
It's just about done.
Yeah.
I'm actually very pleased with it.
Turn the oven
I
up
finally got all the different parts and accoutrements and everything set up and all the buttons
Accoutrement.
pushed and signed in back to stuff. And, it's okay.
All right, good. How does Abby like it?
Abby likes it pretty good, which is a reminder today's Wednesday, so I'll be ending around 9:45 because the sanitation engineers come and, it's very hard to do the show when she's barking at them.
Yes, that's true.
Scott's
That
very
is
good. He always
oversight.
brings little cookies for her, but, she has to bark first before, she settles in.
It's like an oversight committee hearing.
Yeah, but that's like the highlight of her week, you because she gets
them
to
too.
eat a cookie and smell the garbage. I mean, for a dog, like, what else is there?
I don't know. For an oversight committee chairperson, very little more than that as well. Bark and smell the garbage.
So I called in when I did, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's just that thread was so long, I wasn't sure exactly when it was, going to get to the end there.
Now.
Right, which, reminds me of somebody tweeted about the fact that they asked last year about which Star Wars movie actually came first, and they can't report yet because they're still discussing it.
Oh, working on that one. Okay. They should call it the chicken or the egg.
Right, but that goes to a larger theme here, and the larger theme here
That's good. What is
the idea that cynics, of which we all are,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to politics, sometimes get things wrong.
Maybe, yes.
Because we always assume that tomorrow's the same as yesterday. So, what's the big deal about Trump being labeled as being in the midst of a criminal investigation? We knew he was a crook since the 80s. He always gets away with everything, yada, yada, yada. Well,
yes.
True until it's not true. And, the person who really thought that was the original Teflon Don, John Gotti. Nobody can touch me. Capone thought that before him. And so they're right until they're wrong. And eventually things happen and things change. And the problem with the cynics is that they never catch on to when things change. Like everybody knows the Democrats are going to lose the House in 2022 because that's the way it always happens. Well, what if it doesn't? Well, that's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying it always happens, right? Because I don't know any more than you do, but I have to say something to sound smart. So this is what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. Are we going to have a party or something if it doesn't happen? Should we schedule something?
Actually, we will.
We'll have one. They won't.
What's different here is that Rudy Giuliani is a lawyer and his office got raided. Very unusual.
Right.
Tish James is, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so people, can correct me on
There's
this.
Rudy.
But the Manhattan DA does criminal stuff.
Yeah.
And they got his taxes.
Yeah.
And the state attorney general doesn't just do criminal stuff. They do civil stuff too. And so she was working on the civil angle, and the Manhattan DA was working on the criminal angle, and now they're working together, and they're looking at a lot of the same stuff, which is how the Trump organization values property to get, tax assessments done. In other words, tax cheats.
Right.
So there's a lot of material there. And with all of that happening, I think it's imprudent. Wouldn't be prudent to simply dismiss reports that are not leaks, but actual announcements. This isn't Marshall as Supreme Court stuff. These are actual announcements by the prosecutors that they're onto something here.
Okay.
So, fine. Take them at their word.
I mean, I do.
Let's see what they have.
Yeah.
But it's all the same old stuff. It's not the same old stuff. Rudy's offices aren't usually raided. And the New York State Attorney General doesn't usually say, okay, I'm launching a criminal investigation.
Yes. Right.
Those are big deals.
Although, all I'm pointing out is I don't think that they've actually announced that either. They've just said, well, we might be, or we may be about to. But okay.
Well, you don't announce it unless something's going on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a better statement. This actually says we are now actively investigating the Trump Organization in a criminal capacity.
Right. It doesn't say we're indicting him.
Well, we were waiting for that. Right.
Don't say that yet. It might eventually, but not totally where it's at this particular moment.
Yeah. Well,
so
that was the Twitter discussion.
That's part of the whole bigger picture.
Yes.
Of what's going on here. The other big picture, and again, this is again very interesting conversations on Twitter sometimes before the show. So to digress for a little, and then we'll come back.
Is this about the hippopotamus?
No, it's not about the hippopotamus.
Just checking.
That's the HIPAA laws.
Yeah.
But this is about Charles Lane and a pretty bad column he has in the Washington Post.
Lane. Okay.
That says Biden and Trump agree more than you think. Continuity with Trump policies is the most underreported story of 2021.
All right.
And I suppose, we give some examples, and I suppose you can agree with that, if you exclude insurrection and the pandemic and criming. Then otherwise Biden and Trump are, not a dime's bit of difference between them.
Sure.
As one fellow, H. Ross Perot, used to say. And, when I wrote that this morning, that there's not a dime's bit of difference except for those things, a couple of the reporters wrote in and said, we're talking about underreported stories here. Don't you think the pandemic and the insurrection have been covered? And it's an interesting philosophical question here. Because the answer, of course, is yes and no. Yes, it's been widely covered, and no, it hasn't been covered nearly enough.
Yeah.
Both of them are like the stories of the decade. You can't possibly cover it enough. And in fact, where do you get your news? And the reporter who was asking me this question said, well, I get my news from newsletters and, curated sources, so I feel like I'm well informed. Well, you're not the general public. If you only get your news, you're over 65, and the only thing you watch is the 6:30 news during dinner. So you watch Lester Holt or, one of the anchors. Do you know about the Arizona recount, miscount?
Yeah. No.
They covered it, for possibly 45 seconds last week. Does that mean that you really know about it? Do you really know about what's going on with Donald Trump in this criminal investigation? And do you know that there were people, Republicans, at the hearings about what happened on January 6th who said, it was just, a tourist visit. There's no big deal here. Nothing happened. It wasn't really violence. They're picking on patriots. Did you know that? And do you care? I mean,
he does.
Depending upon who you are and where you get your news source, you don't necessarily have all this stuff in focus right in front of you. And so if not, well, to me, that means it's not really being covered properly because you should know this. Well, everybody in America should know that there was an insurrection on January 6th. People know there was a civil war in the 1860s. That's been covered, maybe not well, maybe not completely. Maybe they got the wrong side, but at least they know it happened.
Right? It's been covered.
We're hearing half the country denying that it even happened. It's ridiculous. And so, a lot of that is coverage. And is it because the broadcast media does a worse job than the print media? Well, that's always true. But the fact of the matter is, one of the reasons we need this January 6th commission, which is one of the big stories for today because there's a vote on it, one of the reasons that we need this commission is because people are still denying that it in fact even happened. Hugo Lowell, congressional reporter for Guardian, says, wow, House Democrat Benny Thompson says now he thinks Kevin McCarthy refuses to support a 9/11 style commission into January 6th because he has information damaging the Republicans that he's desperate to keep hidden.
Probably.
Well, yeah, McCarthy was on the phone with Trump during the insurrection. He's going to be subpoenaed. And so, it's an interesting dynamic here with this. I think what happened, my own personal view, could be wrong, is that McCarthy absolutely positively doesn't want a commission to happen because he doesn't really want to look into it. So first they took the tactic of, okay, we'll only agree if you also look into Antifa because we have to throw other stuff out there. Yes. And Pelosi wasn't having it. And he said, okay, we're not going to agree because there's too many Democrats. And if you outvote us 11-10 or whatever the number is you finally decide on, that's no good. And so let's just throw this up as a procedural roadblock. Nobody pays attention to procedure except Kagro X. And so therefore, we'll be able to say it was a partisan witch hunt and we don't want to have any part of it. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is Pelosi called his bluff and said, yeah, okay, fine. That's what you want. Let's go. We're ready. And he said, humana, wait. Mm-hmm. I'm totally opposed to my own suggestion here. Yes. I can't possibly go along with my suggestion. It's too partisan.
Yeah, I can't allow that.
So that's what happened.
Yeah, well,
that's
true.
So now he's stuck. And first they said, well, we're not even going to whip our conference about it. They can vote on their own conscience. And when they realized that they were going to lose a lot of Republican votes,
they don't have conscience,
and this thing's going to pass anyway, they got upset. So yesterday they started whipping it.
Yep.
And, some of the people who actually voted, there was, 10 some odd Republicans who were okay with impeaching Trump. And they said, yeah, they can say whatever they want, but I'm voting for this.
Yeah. Well, now
John
it looks
Katko,
like they may lose even more.
One of the higher ups in the Republican Party who helped negotiate the whole 9/11 style January 6th deal, he'll probably vote for it. We'll see.
I would guess so.
So the votes today, we don't know what's going to happen. It's one of those rare situations where you're going to have a vote on the House today, and you don't totally know what the outcome's going to be. Mm-hmm. You know it's going to pass, but you don't have any idea how many Republicans are going to vote. 20? 10? 3? We don't know.
As many as 60. It's one report. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. So it's always interesting when you actually start to have, and again, I'm a student of the Candidate in a Box seminars that you have been giving.
Okay, yes.
And so now you have a situation where the Republicans have, for a decade, left it up to leadership to tell them how to vote. And now you have a situation where they're not necessarily going to vote the way leadership tells them to.
Yes, that is true.
How's it going to turn out? We don't know. But this goes back to what I'm saying about Trump and Giuliani and criminal investigations. The cynics will say, well, we already know what the outcome is. It's always predetermined. It's always this. It's always that, until it's not. And then when it's not, it's like, well, what happened? Well, I can explain it because I really well, you're the guy that just told me that was never going to happen. Yeah, but now that it did, let me explain exactly how it did because I'm an expert.
Well, yeah.
And welcome to American punditry.
I guess so. I mean, I do see several guesses about how the vote might go. And I guess ultimately,
tell me what
the question is whether it's going to pass. Okay, that I think they can figure out. But let's see. I saw this morning and yesterday evening. Well, this morning, one thing just flipped by on Twitter saying that they were putting it this way: that Republicans were bracing for, as they said, up to 60 defections on this bill.
I think it's going to be 20, and if they write 60, they'll be able to say, "Shoot, at least it wasn't 60."
Right. I mean, I guess that's a possibility. Of course, there was some pushback that came along with it, saying it's just noting that the Republicans have to brace for 60 out of their 200 being willing to say, let's actually find out what the truth is. I won't even tell the truth necessarily. I'll just go find out what it is. But they can only, they're worried about maybe 60 of them might be interested in doing something like that, which was kind of a telling thing. There was also a report last night that there'll be about 30 Republicans or so finding themselves in a bind and not sure how they will find their way out of it, because in the early stages of this game, the back and forth of how to design this commission, when Republicans initially made their what they thought were demands that Democrats would never agree to, they not only proposed that, but they set that out in bill form themselves and said there is a Republican bill that would establish such a commission and do it fairly by, splitting up the subpoena powers and dividing the commission evenly between two parties, et cetera, et cetera. And some 30 Republicans signed on as co-sponsors to that bill. Now the bill that has been worked out, the compromise bill that's coming to the floor, actually mirrors that proposal, and the 30 Republicans who signed on to it.
Pelosi called it his vote because Pelosi knows what she's doing. And by the way, McCarthy's never been a particularly good vote counter, so that has to compound his nervousness.
Yes, and so that's also another issue of it, is it depends how you view this story. If the question is, will it pass, the answer there is Nancy Pelosi says it's coming to the floor, so you know what the answer is. It will pass, unless it's designed as a messaging thing. But we know. But now that they're in the majority, if she's bringing it to the floor, it's because she's counted.
They don't do so many messaging thing when you only have like a 2.5 vote majority.
Yes, right. It doesn't happen quite as often. But here, now they've turned the guessing game into, well, how many Republicans will agree? And it's a big mystery and one of those fun days where you don't know the actual outcome, because the real question is, what's McCarthy's count? And the answer, as always, is, I don't know, and neither does he.
Yeah, exactly. So fascinating stuff. Somebody asked me what I thought, and I just sent the usual picture of somebody eating popcorn. And, the fact of the matter is, this is good. It's good that you don't know. Yeah, and, of course, it's important that we do this in the first place. I have a piece from Amanda Carpenter, I believe it is, from The Bulwark, who sums it up, Why America Needs a January 6th Commission.
Okay. I'd like to know why.
Everybody knows what happened, but explaining why it happened is much harder, which is why America needs a January 6th commission. But the other reason is arguably more important. The threat is ongoing. And that, again, is something that I was arguing about with some of the reporters this morning on Twitter. Why is the insurrection such a big deal? You can't one of them said, you have to get past this. I've got a whole beat to cover, and I can't cover my beat while I'm trying to pay attention to this.
Well, I mean, if the beat is
Congress,
that's
fine. That's too bad, But the fact of the matter is, it's ongoing, and you have to cover it.
Yeah, if it was in your beat when it was happening on January 6th, and it's still happening, isn't it still your beat?
Right. Well, these are people whose beat is something else.
I guess so. Well, right? I have a whole beat. Well, then shut up.
I got to do my job
Stay
here.
in your
How can
lane.
you expect me to pay attention to all of this stuff when I've got a full plate over here with this other stuff that I'm supposed to be doing?
That's funny.
I feel your pain,
Reporters,
because there's a lot of news out there. But the fact of the matter is, because you feel the way you feel, you stop covering this and you start covering that. You tell me you have to. I get it. But don't make the argument that I'm covering this other stuff and not the insurrection, because the insurrection is already fully covered. That's not what's going on.
This too.
You're deciding not to because you don't have enough time in the day. I get that. You're allowed. I'll allow it. But that's not the same thing as therefore it's fully covered. Or I know about it, therefore we don't have to cover it.
Okay. This is reporters now writing let me stay in my lane stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And so it's just an interesting overall large picture of where politics are at the moment. And that's why I'm saying even the cynics are getting to the point of saying, look, just let me stay in my lane and stop bothering me about this stuff, because I don't know what's going to happen. And if you don't know what's going to happen, then just say you don't know what's going to happen rather than lecture us about, well, we all know nothing's going to happen. You don't know that.
Yeah. Or, I understand. I guess I understand the instinct in terms of like, all right, well, someone says, oh, yeah, well, how come you're not covering the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Now there's a lane I'm not good at. And here I'm saying,
no.
I can't do it because I'm not smart on that. It's complicated.
It's really nuanced, and we don't have all day.
Yeah.
We only have 2 hours.
That would be an answer. Right. I can't help you on that. I mean, I'm a spectator like you on that subject. I once covered it because I knew something about it, or whatever this other journalist was talking about.
On Twitter, of course, I'm really tempted to say things like, well, why don't you tell me what you think as I put you on mute?
Just hold on a second. I got to make sure I get that clicked first.
Yeah.
All right. Well, when does that vote happen? I don't know. Today.
So I don't know when the vote happens. It's certainly today. Schedule. It's going to be interesting. It's important. I think it'll show us a lot. And again, part of the discussion here, again, this comes back to a whole lot of themes that we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks, all coming together today in a vote.
Yeah, but we already covered
What
it.
about the whole Liz Cheney thing? Well, that's part of this. She said we need it. She said McCarthy knows stuff. She said McCarthy should be subpoenaed. And she's on national TV saying this every day. And so here's the vote. McCarthy says, well, we don't need this vote. And what are the rest of the Republicans going to say? The ones who threw Liz Cheney out may, in fact, vote with the Democrats to get this done, at least some of them.
You think? Oh, I guess it could be crossover. What a confusing time. Okay.
Right. And, of course, since it was a voice vote and they didn't do it on record, we can't really compare because that's why they did a voice vote and they didn't want it on record.
That's true, too. Okay. Yeah, that could make it an
interesting
interesting
all of this
study.
is like, okay, well, you're going to be on record today, buddy.
Yeah.
And so when I run against you, I'm going to say you voted against the January 6th commission that was about insurrection. You're on the record as doing that.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're from the area around Athens, Georgia, you are on the record as saying it was, it's just a tourist visit because I don't know where you go when you do tourist stuff, but maybe you have a habit of going to insurrections.
I guess so. We're piling up the furniture in your hotel room against the
same person
room
who
service.
said that was piling up the hotel room stuff. I mean, except it was in the Capitol.
Right.
But
Room
the same
service.
person who was helping to block the door now says it was just tourist stuff. So it's garbage. It's crap.
Sure.
And one of the reasons of doing the commission is to get that established, if necessary, under oath.
Subpoena that guy.
That it was not just
Yeah. Well, I'd love to have an explanation. That would be make for some interesting testimony. Not necessary, of course, to establishing the...
And just to throw in before the break, Mitch McConnell has two ways of saying no. No, absolutely not. And I haven't decided yet. Let's take a look.
Yes.
And he's in the latter camp right now.
Right.
Waiting to see how this vote goes.
Impeachment play. I'm open to it. I'm open to voting no. Thank you. Bye. Okay. Well, we'll be back in 2 minutes. Everything will have been straightened out by then, I'm sure. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. And send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, I found the tweet over the break of where I thought I had seen 60, and I guess if this is the right tweet, this is the one I was thinking of anyway, and maybe I saw another one, but I think I may have transposed some numbers, and it was may have grabbed mentally grabbed the 6 from January 6th and transposed it with the 4 in 40, that they were bracing for just 40 House Republicans. That was Ana Cabrera's reporting and Stephen White's comment on it on Twitter, saying bracing for just 40 Republicans in the House to actually demand the truth about this terrorist attack. Is the story all by itself. But okay, it's 40 was that estimate. If anybody has seen 60, let me know. But it's a guessing game is what we're saying.
Right. Well, let's take a look at Jake Sherman, because he was writing about the fact that there's probably going to be 20 or so. We'll see.
That's
and
like
the fact
40.
that they were trying to whip it last night means they're really nervous because they've lost control over what's going on. So this is what they say this morning. Unity is what they were striving for in the House Republican Conference this week, and up with the infighting, they're going to take a stand against Biden. But for the second week in a row, House Republicans find themselves engaged in a nasty round of internecine warfare, second-guessing and turning against the tactics of their leadership. And the topic of disagreement this time is a bill authorizing a bipartisan commission to review the deadly January 6th attack.
Yes,
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said he was opposed to the legislation, but John Katko, who helped put together the bipartisan deal at McCarthy's behest, made a pitch for his colleagues to back it. And McCarthy's gripe is lame to many House Republicans. He said this commission should be focused on other political violence, not just January 6th. A lot of Republicans found that excuse incredibly weak. especially since most GOP members had called for a January 6th commission months ago. There are 31 sponsors of a GOP bill to create the commission. You mentioned that, David. That mirrors the bipartisan compromise. The GOP truly doesn't have solid ground to stand on here. And within hours of McCarthy coming out against the bill, dozens of rank-and-file Republicans were telling their leaders they're inclined to side with Kagro and House Democrats. In a stunning rebuke of the California Republicans' leadership, we hear anywhere between 20 to 50 Republicans could vote for this commission. That's the quote I was looking for.
Okay.
With the total very fluid. Republicans are concerned about a jailbreak in which a flood of lawmakers backed the legislation en masse. The House Problem Solvers Caucus endorsed it late Tuesday, which could help bring over a dozen or so GOP votes. And behind all this internal drama, of course, looms Trump. And yada, yada, yada stuff. But regardless, the GOP leadership started pressuring the lawmakers Tuesday night to vote against the bill and whipping Republicans against the commission. The GOP leadership said the panel would run too long and could interfere with efforts to prosecute the January 6th rioters. And we spoke to a dozen House Republicans during votes Tuesday afternoon. We're surprised how many were undecided, squishy, or leaning toward voting for the commission, which is a bad sign for the leadership. And they named names: Tom Reed, David Joyce, Anthony Gonzalez, who's a yes, Liz Cheney, who's a yes, Jeff Van Drew said he sympathized with McCarthy but hadn't made up his mind yet. Roger Williams from Texas is undecided. Rodney Davis from Illinois still deciding. Tom Cole, he's undecided, ranking member on the Rules Committee. Chuck Fleischman, Nancy Mace. Not only is there disagreement among House Republicans, there's also a tiny sliver of space at the moment between McCarthy and Mitch McConnell. McConnell said he's willing to listen. And what it means for McCarthy? He's damaged by the incident, even if the January 6th commission bill never becomes law. I told you this last week, that he was going to win the battle and lose the war. This is part of it. Remember, he wants to be speaker. Things that damage him are bad for him.
Damage very often bad.
Right. Now, they're going to blame Katko, throw him under the bus. McCarthy Alley suggests he cut a deal that some Republicans couldn't back. But for McCarthy, this comes soon after the Cheney drama, so it's been a very rough stretch for House Republicans. Okay. And we expect to hear from Tom Keene and Lee Hamilton, the 9/11 Commission co-chairs, endorsing the January 6th Commission.
They're alive. I
mean, there's a lot of stuff here, whether it's Liz Cheney's ability to use the microphone and podium, or whether it's the 9/11 Commission saying this is a good idea. Yeah, McCarthy's in trouble.
Yeah.
He's going to lose this vote. He's going to look bad. And, we'll see where that goes. What does it all mean? I don't know. Unlike the other pundits, I'm not guaranteeing I know what's going to happen, because this is what always happens. In fact, what I'm just told you about, that never happens.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be this will be somewhat exciting to watch it come down. And I'll see if I can find that competing bill. It's not always that easy to find something that they don't really want found. But I'd love to have that list of those 30 and see how many of them defect. And then I guess now it'll be interesting to see what the final number is. We can all bet on it and maybe base a cryptocurrency on it somehow.
Right. Now, here's a piece from Tom Edsall, how the storming of the Capitol became a, quote, normal tourist visit. And if it's too long, you didn't want to read it. It basically comes down to the fact that we're all tribal and the tribes have taken their sides. But what I thought was really interesting is something that I referred to on the show, which is that what happens is if you don't talk about it enough, if the Democrats make a decision not to talk about it, firstly because if your opponents are drowning, throw them an anvil. Let them talk about it, and don't get in the way and make it partisan by weighing in. That's part of it. And the other is that at the same time, the Democrats are in fact in power, and they want to pass stuff. Yes. So it's very difficult to throw January 6th in the Republicans' face for them every day, when in fact they're trying to get somewhere on infrastructure and all these other things. So they have a different agenda. They're actually trying to govern. And trying to governance, if you believe in governments, it's going to hand tie you. It's going to tie your hands. It's going to hog tie you. If you're trying to be totally partisan, you can't be both at the same time easily. It can be done, but you have to be subtle about it, and that doesn't always work politically. So the Democrats have a much more difficult job than the Republicans, and the Republicans can't even do their job, which is to stay united in opposition. for all the stuff that we're just talking about. Sarah Binder, political scientist at George Washington University, somebody we both respect, adds some detail. My sense is the move by Republican office holders to muddy the waters over what happened at the Capitol likely contributes to the waning of GOP voters' concerns. We heard a burst of these efforts to rewrite the history this past week during the House Oversight hearing, but keep in mind that those efforts came on the heels of earlier efforts to downplay the violence, whitewash Trump's role, and to cast doubt on the identities of the insurrectionists. No doubt, House GOP leaders stalling of Democrats' effort to create a 9/11 type commission also helped to diffuse GOP interest and to keep the issue out of the headlines. No bipartisan inquiry, no media spotlight to keep the issue alive. And further in this article, one of the political scientists that Tom Edsall surveyed, said, well, if the Democrats don't talk about it, it's not in the news as much. Mm-hmm. So this all goes back to how I started the show, which is that some reporters think that the insurrection has been completely covered. And I think that's bullshit.
Well, okay.
And I've just talked for 35 minutes about why I think it's bullshit. We haven't even finished covering the stuff that needs to be covered, including today's vote.
Cover just why.
So I rest my case.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're going to rest it? Now it's just getting exciting. Okay. Very good. I'll accept that.
My case is under arrest.
Well, at least somebody should be for all of this. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm astonished, and I can't wait to read later on which reporters this discussion took place with and how it went. I know you shared those links with me, and so I'll take a look. I guess maybe we'll include them in the roundup too. Now everybody should be intrigued. You should, I
thought it was an interesting discussion, but then again, I was having it. So
yes, right. Well,
can't make you think that everybody would be interested in it, but that's the thing. So Republicans identify with Trump. That.
Yes,
and this commission is going to happen, and the same pattern emerges with after Trump lost, he dropped favorability with the Republican Party, gained some of it back. But again, as we talked about, I think on Monday, if 80% of the Republican Party is backing Trump, that means 20% aren't, and that's still a healthy chunk of voters potentially. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's some political scientists who think the voters have developed scandal fatigue, but I don't think it's the voters. I think it's the reporters.
Yeah, in many cases that could certainly be true.
Right. So again, all of that is part of the context for why this vote is just so darn interesting.
Yes.
And I think that the very fact that it is means it's going to be covered. So guess what? January 6th is back in the news.
Okay.
For those of you who thought it was completely covered, are you paying attention to what's going on? Because look at today, or at least tonight. And then that means it'll be, if it's 5 o'clock, it won't make the evening news, and that means it'll be tomorrow.
Yeah.
So now you got another 24 hours of coverage.
Oh, right. That's true. They'll definitely be discussing it into tomorrow, analyzing it, looking at the lists of people who voted which way. Brian Monroe suggests, what if the Dems should perhaps consider just passing the bill on voice vote today? And ordinarily you want to hold Republicans to account, but this might make things more complicated and more frustrating for them, and including Trump, if he can't accurately identify and definitively pin down who voted, quote unquote, against him and who didn't. That would be an interesting way of.
Yeah, Francis marked that. It's a very interesting suggestion. I don't know if that's what they're going to do. I think it's worth it to get their name on it. But here's Julie Ronsky writing in that Edsall article of the University of Mississippi, suggesting Democrats appear to have made a strategic decision against pressing the issue too hard. So that's where Brian's suggestion comes in. Okay. If voters' concerns over January 6th are fading, it's because political elites and the media are not making this issue salient. I suspect that Democrats have not made the issue salient recently in order to avoid antagonizing Republicans and exacerbating existing divides. Democrat focus seems more on collective action goals related to COVID-19 vaccine rollout and economic infrastructure. Democrats, Ronsky continued, appear to have taken a pass on the identity-driven zero-sum debate regarding 2020 election, since there's no compromise on this issue. You either believe the truth or you believe the lie. Once you enter the world of pitting people against each other who believe in different realities who win or lose, it's going to be nearly impossible to create bipartisan consensus on sweeping legislative initiatives like H.R. 1 and infrastructure bills. But in a twist, Ronsky suggests it's maybe to Democrats' advantage to stay out of this debate in order to let it fester within Republican ranks. Not all Republican identifiers are strong partisans. Some people may align with the party for specific issue policy reasons. Their identity is not as tied up in partisanship, and this means there are intra-party fractures in the Republican Party regarding the big lie. So to Brian's point, getting him on record shows you how big that fracture is.
Yeah. Right, and they'll want there'll be some who want to do that, and I guess the strategic reason for not doing it, and the commission hasn't been formed, hasn't started its work, hasn't even passed the House yet, for that matter, much less the Senate. So yeah, it's a good. I mean, it very rarely do things simply go through on final passage on the floor by voice vote. So it's unlikely to be the case, and sometimes people just reflexively ask for a recorded vote, just because that's always, generally speaking, what's done. But it would be a good thing to consider, just for gamesmanship. But
right.
Okay.
So it makes a good collection of what people think. This one, Republican leaners seem to be moving away from the party when hearing about inter-party conflict regarding the legitimacy of Joe Biden's win, Ronsky wrote, citing a May 14th paper by Catherine Clayton, a graduate student in political science at Stanford. I think we referred to this on Monday. Clayton finds that those who call themselves not very strong Republicans demonstrate less favorable opinions of their party, reduce perceptions that the Democratic Party poses a threat as a result of exposure to information about conflict within their party. That's the other thing. You have this vote, then you have to explain how many Republicans voted with the Democrats, and then you have to cover this in the news. Then you are telling Republican voters who are usually not subject to this kind of information that there's an issue, that it isn't so clear that the January 6th insurrection was a walk in the park and a party, and that you're going to hear things that you probably don't know because you are listening to sources that won't tell you, but because of this coverage, you're going to hear it.
Guess so.
What's the implication? I don't know. You can forget about it a week later like you always do, but at least you're going to hear it, which is different than normal. And if you're one of those weaker Republicans in terms of ties to the party, maybe it'll make a difference down the road. It certainly will to supporting Kevin McCarthy or thinking he's a leader. Yeah,
well, you don't have to be a close observer to doubt that. But
well, maybe you don't even know who he is.
Right. Well, okay. Yeah, there's
you're
also
not really a close observer, like what's going on here.
Yes. Although that would be evidence too. Like, I don't know who that is. Well, would you say that a person is a strong leader?
He cites other experts, including Jeff Greenfield, very good political observer, who makes the point that it's not like the Republican Party is divided. They're not, but they are. When you say it's not divided, what you're really saying is that the Trump side has the votes. That's not the same thing as there being a small but significant faction still within the Republican Party who doesn't necessarily go along with all this stuff. How big? We're going to see today.
Okay. Yes. And
there was a vote in the House, by the way, the other day.
Yes.
About AAPI hate crimes.
Yes. That had 60 involved in it.
Yeah, because what happened is that the Democrats passed it, and there's 211 Republicans in the House right now with the vacancies, if I'm not mistaken, and 60 some odd voted against that.
Yeah, 62. Your quote that you've got from Manu Raju in the roundup says.
Right.
62 Republicans.
And so if that's the case, that's a divided Republican by 211 versus 62. I mean, the fact that there were 62 votes against a hate crime is awful, but it wasn't the entire party.
Yes.
They were divided on this.
Right, true.
Divisions
and significantly.
And divisions are going to happen even more today. So the whole idea, well, they're completely united. They're not.
Right. And again, to clarify.
Well, there is no fight. Yeah, there is. It's just that one side happens to be winning, but that doesn't mean there isn't a fight.
That's true.
How is it going to turn out? Well, the other side already won. Okay, but that doesn't mean there's damage not done.
Right. Again, to clarify, the damage is 62 House Republicans voting against a bill that would combat hate crimes against Asian Americans.
Right. If the Republican Party were truly united, it would have been 211 against.
Yeah.
And it was only 62.
Minus Josh Hawley. Only Josh Hawley in the Senate. Right. It's pretty disgraceful. And I mean, well, one thing is you could say, well, it's the usual suspects. That's certainly true. But I guess the news here is there are now 62 suspects.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Okay. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, big picture, how popular or unpopular is Joe Biden? According to 538, exactly where he started. He's at 52.8 for, 40.7 against. Nothing has changed. These lines seem to be just as immutable as.
Now I hear you're clicking. All right, you're back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened,
Okay,
but I heard
me
some
neither.
beeping. Wasn't me.
Oh, well, I didn't beep.
Anyway, but the
yes.
sanitation engineers are coming. Abby's about to start barking, and
That's
so
what it
time to
is.
go.
Pre-crime.
And just
Alarm
anyway,
went
that's
off.
my rant.
Okay, I can appreciate it for what it is. That's Abby's rant, and I think you're even now. You both had two, and that's all we have time for today. But I appreciate it. All right. Anything else you need to sneak in between barks, or no? You can.
Well, here's the morning consult poll
okay.
that goes to the other big story that isn't covered enough. That's the pandemic. Good news for U.S. economy. Comfort spikes among vaccinated Americans following a big shift in CDC's COVID-19 guidance. You can make fun of the CDC all you want to, and we do. But the fact of the matter is Americans like what they said. They like what they heard. They just haven't figured out exactly what to do with it locally, and they haven't figured out what to do with it nationally, and that's okay. You know, it's not like, well, if you don't agree with me, you're stupid, is the only way of interpreting what's going on here.
I guess that's a step forward. We don't have to deal with things that way exactly. All right. Certainly it was a signal that a lot of people were very happy to get, not just anti-maskers or people who don't believe in the virus or science, but people who do follow it very closely and who may say, I may adapt how I will implement this instruction, but I'm glad to hear it. The CDC thinks that the day is coming soon. They think, I guess, depending on the circumstances, has arrived now. I, monitoring my own circumstances more closely than they can monitor it from 50,000 feet, now know that there's that proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. If I'm not quite comfortable taking off the mask yet, fine, but I know it won't be long. So that's nice.
Right. Well, let me give you some numbers just to put this in perspective. Post-CDC mask guidance, vaccinated Americans see largest boost in comfort with dining out and shopping. But what that means is dining at a restaurant before the CDC said anything was 56% comfortable, after 67. Yeah, it's a big jump, but a third of the country is still not ready.
Yeah.
Shopping at a mall, 51 versus 60. The malls require you to wear a mask. At least they did Monday when I took my Mac in to get serviced.
Okay.
Right. So I went to the mall and I wore a mask and they wore a mask and everybody was still shopping there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you're still 40% not ready yet, that means the economy still has room to grow. And so on and so forth. Socializing in public places, renting a car, going on a date, going to a wedding, going to a party, 34% beforehand said they were okay with that, 42% now. People aren't ready to completely open up. A lot of this is psychological. You can't have 587,000 or more deaths and say, okay, well, that was yesterday. Today we're just going to do this. That's not how people work. And that's not how life works. And so expecting that, okay, yesterday you were supposed to listen to what CDC was saying, and today, what's the matter with you? Why don't you take a mask off? Don't you believe in science? You know, it misses the point of how people need to adjust. Give people space to make that adjustment. Give them a month. Give them 2 weeks. Give them whatever it takes.
Yeah. I think that's certainly reasonable. It's, I guess, the people who've been anxious to undo all of the restrictions all along, they've been adjusting this whole time. And, everybody else needs to feel.
These are the same people who are waiting and itching for these things to end are going to glom on anything and say, you see, we were right all along.
Yeah, right. Of course.
Right? 587,000 people are dead, but I was right.
Yeah, they were all wrong.
For the most part, you know. So again, it's interesting stuff, and I think it's well worth watching. So with that, I'll sign off. I will see you tomorrow. We'll come up with some other stuff.
Okay.
Maybe more about the Trump Organization and the fact that, in my view, this is actually real. It doesn't guarantee anything, just like today's vote is not guaranteed. But now is the time to take the popcorn out because unlike just recent history, you really don't know what's going to happen next year. And that's always interesting. And, of course, it puts the pundits at a disadvantage because their job is to tell you what happens before it happens. And they don't know. And they hate being exposed as not knowing.
Right. True. And
so that's why we follow Kagro X, so you can explain the procedure for us, because sometimes the procedure dictates how it's going to happen. Just like with that voice vote. Let's see what happens.
Right. Okay.
Telling us how they do the vote is going to tell us a lot about the vote.
True. Yeah, I mean, I have my doubts about it's just so infrequently done on the House floor. But if it does happen,
we'll know how it happened.
Yeah, it would be very telling if it did happen. It would be a very unusual thing, and it would be a great idea. I like Brian's idea. Whether it happens or not, well, I guess that'll be the story. All right. Can you take your mask off to eat popcorn? That's one remaining question we can address tomorrow.
And if I do it at home.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of process and nuance and masks, I recently discovered, since we're always talking about Virginia because you can't avoid it.
Love Virginia. Love people in Virginia.
Watching the governor's office deal with the CDC guidance and the way they have structured things to date, how they instructed Virginians to comply with COVID mitigation practices and masking in particular. I don't know if it's a unique problem. It probably exists in another state somewhere. But as it turns out, they're now wrangling within us, and I guess the state legislature is going to have to do something in the next couple of weeks as he's getting ready to issue executive orders rescinding prior executive orders with mask mandates involved. And I guess the original emergency orders had expiration dates to them. And I guess it's now however many revisions to these executive orders. I think there's been 7. It now rests that I guess at the end of June, perhaps, is the final expiration point for the executive orders, after which not only will the mask mandates now plan to be lifted, but after that point, now everybody's saying, well, you can still continue to wear a mask if you want to, et cetera, et cetera. Virginia now discovering we actually have state laws, or I guess Commonwealth laws, that make it illegal to wear a mask after this mask mandate expires or is rescinded. And I think that stems from, normal times, from before a pandemic when it was considered
when
law
everybody
enforcement.
was trying to avoid being Jason.
Yeah, yes, right. We don't want people walking into masks or malls or what have you. Not masks, but banks and malls with masks on. That's actually
Holding
something we're going to discourage.
And chainsaw's legal,
right?
but the mask
Yeah,
isn't.
right. Yeah, sure. Well, as long as your chainsaw fires bullets, it's okay. But yeah, so that's a really weird and possibly unique. But I can't think that can't believe that there's no other state that doesn't have laws against going around masked. We're gonna have to figure that one out.
Interesting. And by the way, before I go, just another thing. Keep an eye on what happens with Arizona, given the fact that they had to pack up all the ballots there because graduation is taking over the venue.
Right.
So let's see how stupid they sound and what they're going to do about that. Already, people are refusing to cooperate, and we'll see.
We'll update you on that. Free ballot with every graduation.
Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay. See ya. I'm sure the garbage guys are getting the sanitation engineers almost there. The barking about to begin. Yes. Maybe we could start in on all of that in Arizona. I've got a break coming up, of course, but let's start in on that. I put aside a piece yesterday and didn't get to it. It's not as boring as it looks, given that it's illustrated with a photo of a alleged auditor yawning on the counting floor, but yawning behind a face shield. That's nice to know. In Arizona, Republicans accidentally created a robust demonstration of the shoddiness of their fraud claims, writes Philip Bump, national correspondent, in case you were wondering what his lane was, what his beat is, over at the Washington Post. And we'll squeeze in what we can before the break on this one. Bill Gates, not that Bill Gates, but the other Bill Gates, there's another one, is vice chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and CEO of Microsoft. One of 4 Republicans on that body. On Monday afternoon, he made his frustrations with the ongoing, and he puts them in air quotes here, audit, quote, audit of votes from the 2020 general election in that county apparent. That is, the frustration is now apparent. It's time to say enough is enough, Gates said. It's time to push back on the, quote, big lie. We must do this. We must do this as a member of the Republican Party, or I guess as members. Who wants help with this, I think. We must do this as a member of the Board of Supervisors. We need to do this as a country. He's speaking, of course, in the regal third person for some reason. Not really sure why he uses royal we in all of this. In addition to his comments at a news conference, Gates was one of 7 signatories, most of them Republican, to a brutally blunt letter. It's linked, if you want to look at it. Offered in response to questions posed by Arizona State Senator Karen Fann, a Republican. Fan, as president of the Senate, has been the legislative face of the vote counting effort that her Republican-led chamber authorized. Blame her. She's going under the bus. The questions she posed were apparently inspired by the team handling the audit, the group known as Cyber Ninjas, and centered on various vague allegations of improper handling of ballots or deleted material. You may have seen that the former guy used his blog or whatever typewriter, I'm not certain what he's working on, to allege the other day that the Maricopa County's voter registration or voter tallying database had been deleted and obvious fraud and how dare you and someone needs to go to jail. And apparently, no, that's not what happened at all. Not only were the Maricopa County people saying, I'm looking at the database right now, these guys weren't even looking in the right place for the database. Anyway, the response from Gates, the other Bill Gates, and his colleagues is unsparing. The Arizona Senate is not acting in good faith, has no intention of learning anything about the November 2020 general election, and is only interested in feeding the various festering conspiracy theories that fuel the fundraising schemes of those pulling your strings, the letter to Fan reads. That does sound kind of unsparing. You have rented out the once good name of the Arizona State Senate to grifters and con artists who are fundraising hard-earned money from our fellow citizens, even as your contractors parade around the Coliseum, the location, of course, of the vote counting effort, hunting for bamboo and something they call kinematic artifacts, while shining purple lights for effect. None of these things are done in a serious audit. The result is that the Arizona Senate is held up to ridicule in every corner of the globe, and our democracy is imperiled. Point by point, the letter rebuts the claims raised by Fan, arguing convincingly that the senator and the inexperienced team leading the audit, that's a new word for it. I'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Almost forgot that I had to come back at all. I was off enjoying the rebranding of the Arizona audit as Audiot. I think that'll work. We got to get word out on that one and see if we can trademark it and claim ownership of it and make millions somehow off of this. All right, let's see. We have our good friend and our favorite person who makes it uncomfortable for us to read their crazy screen name on the air, Left-Leaning Cock. Thank you, Left-Leaning Cock, for chiming in from the home of the Gamecocks, South Carolina. We get it. We're okay with it. And this turns out Virginia, not alone in being, by default, anti-mask, South Carolina, home of the Cox, I guess, is similarly situated. And I have actual screen grab here thanks to our friend. Well, let's see. Article 3. What are we looking at in the South Carolina State Code? I guess offenses tending to breach of peace. Section 16-7-110, wearing masks and the like. That's funny. It sounds very informal, but I suppose it works for legislative language. No person over 16 years of age shall appear or enter upon any lane, walk, alley, street, road, public way, or highway of this state, or upon the public property of the state, or of any municipality or county in this state. They're being very insistent about this. While wearing a mask or other device which conceals his identity, which I guess means that in South Carolina, 16 is when you have to stop trick-or-treating. I get the sense that they actually wrote this with Halloween in mind. Anyway, nor shall any such person demand entrance or admission to or enter upon the premises in or into the enclosure or house of any other person while wearing a mask or device which conceals his identity. And I guess there we could say a medical device not intended to conceal identity might, I suppose, be given a pass in this. But probably a lot of states have something like that. And, it stems from an anti-crime what? Statute. I'm sure Virginia and South Carolina are not alone. I'm just curious about the rest of this language. Legislative language is always kind of fascinating, especially when it's a little bit outdated. This comes from, I guess it was originally adopted in, well, I can't tell whether, maybe this isn't when it was originally adopted, but since the last revision of the code. But this appears to be of 1950s or 60s vintage, according to that. Anyway, where were we? No, nor shall any such person, while wearing a mask or device which conceals his identity, there are hers out there whose identities could be concealed, but again, vintage from the 50s and 60s. Nor shall any such person participate in any meeting or demonstration upon the private property of another, unless he shall have first obtained the written permission of the owner and the occupant of such property. So, if you want to trick or treat at 16 or 17 years old, if you get express written permission from each homeowner that you visit, everything will be fine. By contrast, I doubt whether you could, for instance, prosecute the property owners for admitting someone known to be over the age of 16 without issuing prior written permission first. I think you're probably safe. But yeah, that'll pose an interesting problem for probably, I would imagine, 40 plus states. I don't know where they wouldn't have a mask prohibition. I don't know if it gets that specific as South Carolina's did, but they're into specificity there. We know, for instance, to which side their cocks lean. I'm just telling you what it says here on my screen. It's not dirty because we're talking about chickens. There you go. Okay. Greg has thankfully trademarked the audiot slip. I think that'll work pretty well. I think probably, well, let's see. Audios come from the Deloitte region of France, we are informed via Twitter, thanks to R. Luxford, who says, otherwise they're just sparkling morons. Okay, very funny. All right, we got lots to catch up on. We'll continue with that read-through of the Arizona story, too, because we left it at an interesting point, not just because we had made up the word audiot for people who are into this audit thing, but again, point by point, that very sharply worded letter, we're into sharply worded letters, rebuts the claims raised by Fan, right, the state Senate president in Arizona, arguing convincingly that the senator and the inexperienced team leading the audit simply have no idea what they are talking about. The impression one gets from the letter, maybe we should read the letter, is the impression you might get from watching a YouTube flat earther challenge an esteemed geology professor on the shape of the planet. A thorough response with no shortage of demonstrated disdain. My guess is that the highlights are that which is quoted, or those which are quoted here in this piece, or we could just say herein. But I don't know. I'll click through and see maybe how long is the letter and get some sense of whether we think it'll be worth reading. Something particularly interesting is happening with the Arizona, quote, audit, as its proponents call it. That is Bump's writing here. We're back to the article. Something particularly interesting is happening in Arizona that has otherwise been missing in the months since the 2020 election, because it's happening now in relative isolation, and because it carries at least some sort of authoritative stamp that provides a process for feedback, barely. The nation is at long last able to directly confront false election claims promoted by former President Donald Trump and his allies. Interesting. The result is Republicans stepping up to deride the process as a grotesque, unfounded sham. Probably not what he was thinking. To be very clear, there is nothing unusually sloppy or unfounded about the Arizona audit. With no obvious exception, all of the allegations of fraud and malfeasance that have emerged since Trump lost 6 months ago have been equally shoddy and baseless. I get what you mean. Each of them has been the product of an underinformed or obviously biased complainant, or alternatively, has been numeric prestidigitation. My goodness, I think I got that right. Meant to imply fraud that never actually manifests in any other way. What sets Arizona apart is that it can't be lumped into some overarching narrative of irregularities, and it can't simply be left at this guy who has a PhD in chemistry says that the N-curve values are suspicious. They wanted to count the votes, and now they are, and now the actual experts have permanent palm marks on their forehead. Okay, whew. It's really quite clarifying. I haven't felt like it's been clarifying in the last paragraph or so, but okay. Even Senator Lindsey Graham had to sort of shrug at the whole thing. I accept the results of the election, he said on Monday. You know, they're playing that scheme out in Washington. They say nobody's really questioning the election. We're all on the same side here, except some of us are not, and we're lying, and we ought to be investigated. Anyway, I don't know what the audit is all about in Arizona. I don't know the details, but I am ready to move on, which is interesting, I guess, particularly for Lindsey Graham to say, because I don't know anything about it, and I don't know the details. I'm ready to move on. But he didn't know anything about what was going on in Georgia either, but he picked up the phone and tried to pressure Georgia elected officials to tell him something different, even though he's not from Georgia. That he was willing to insert himself in. But in Arizona, this one is too embarrassing even for Lindsey Graham to try to intervene in. This is a fervently pro-Trump senator, Bump reminds us, who in the weeks after the election spoke of calling Arizona, not just Georgia, but calling Arizona to try to figure out a path to victory for Trump. Were there any obvious legitimacy to the Arizona vote count that's underway? You'd think he'd embrace it. Instead, he has done the opposite. That is interesting. Trump himself, of course, has supported the Arizona effort. He has never been bound to reality and has always embraced any wild claim that entered his radar, but he's obviously frustrated that his allies on cable news aren't willing to link their reputations to what's happening in the state. Fox News is afraid to cover it. There's barely a mention, or rarely a mention. He complained on his blog over the weekend. Likewise, Newsmax, and I guess this is all supposed to be in Trump voice, but I think I'm losing that touch. I hope so. Anyway, let's see. Likewise, I'm not even going to try. Newsmax has been virtually silent on this subject because they are intimidated by threats of lawsuits. One America News, OAN, and then he has to throw in the pitch, one of the fastest growing networks on television, and the hottest, he actually puts that in there, the hottest, is doing a magnificent job of exposing the massive fraud that took place. What does the OAN coverage look like? In a report from Monday, it consisted of correspondent Pearson Sharp walking through fans' original letter to the Board of Supervisors, the letter that prompted the Sharp response from the county's Republican leadership. The is actually in the text of the article here. Calling the coverage credulous minimizes it. The report is little more than Sharp repeating one of fans' claims and then adding an eyebrow-raised insinuation that malfeasance had been proved. Considered in the broadest context, the OAN report does expose a massive fraud that's underway, but not the one that Trump thinks. But to the supervisor's point about how the, quote, audit fuels fundraising schemes, it's clear that the utility of alleging fraud still exists. It exists for Trump for psychological and political reasons. It exists for OAN for audience-building reasons. And it exists for right-wing lawmakers for attention-seeking reasons. So Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, and Matt Gaetz have planned a rally for Phoenix on Friday, assuming that neither of them is otherwise detained. Both also signed a letter sent by a small group of lawmakers to Deputy Assistant Attorney General Pamela Karlan, who had questioned the legality of the audit. That letter, too, centered on fans' allegations. It also assured Karlan that Representative Andy Biggs of Arizona had, quote, personally visited the site of the election audit, and we are confident in the integrity of the process and look forward to reviewing the results no matter what is found. Biggs was also identified by one of the organizers of the protests at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, just to tie it to that, as having helped develop the plan for the day. What's happening in Arizona is unusual only in that it is happening in a spotlight, and it is happening through a formal system that allows it to be held to account. It is part and parcel with the other claims that Trump, Biggs, Gates, and the rest have made since November, but it is happening at a quieter moment and more directly challenging the authority of Republican officials without showing any results. There probably will never be a have you no sense of decency moment for Trump's efforts to argue that the election results were suspect. That's too bad. But Republicans coming together to identify the flagship effort to undermine those results as biased and sloppy is at least a step in that direction. So, good conclusion. Thanks to Philip Bump for putting things nicely. Do we want to see the letter? I wonder, does he link to Fan's letter? I'm not really sure. But there are two links offered here. One to a Washington Post piece and the other to, does it go directly to the letter? Yeah, let's go to the one that goes directly to the letter. Just curious, how long is this letter? Is it paginated? Oh, my goodness, 14 pages. So that must be pretty withering. I guess I'm just a little curious. But I'll read it off the air and perhaps see if there is anything of interest. I guess maybe we'll read this one because I think I have another piece set aside about, in particular, the claim that the database was deleted. Let's see what their response to that one is. Your accusation that Maricopa County deleted data is false. You claim the entire database directory from the D drive of the machine EMS primary has been deleted. This is false. The database was not deleted from the server, and an analysis of the screenshot you provided, which we reproduce below, further proves that fact. We demand that you immediately rescind your false and malicious tweet asserting that Maricopa County, quote, spoiled evidence in the days before we provided the server to the Senate. Your tweet, which relies on the modified date shown in the screenshot as evidence of wrongdoing, is demonstrably false. The only thing it does demonstrate is your auditor's incompetence. Their stunning lack of a basic understanding for how their software works is egregious and only made worse by the false tweet sent defaming the hardworking employees of Maricopa County. That the Senate would launch such a grave accusation via Twitter, not only before waiting for an answer to your questions, but also before your so-called audit demonstrates to the world that the Arizona Senate is not acting in good faith, has no intention of learning anything about the November 2020 general election, but is only interested in feeding the various festering conspiracy theories that fuel the fundraising schemes of those pulling your strings. We read that part, and about renting out the once good name of the Arizona Senate. Yeah, all right, well, that doesn't add much. It's just yelling at them. And I guess this gets to the details of it. I mean, shall we continue on? It's not that long. That let's see, on April 12th, 2021, the Elections Department shut down the server to be packed up and made ready for delivery to the Senate. Remember, the state Senate actually subpoenaed all this stuff and then handed it over to cyber ninjas. At no point was any data deleted when shutting down the server and packing up the equipment. Windows servers will often change the metadata, that is, additional data on files such as the creation date, access date, modified date, owner, etc., on Microsoft SQL database files based on actions performed on the Microsoft SQL on the Microsoft SQL services that are needed to run the databases. The modified dates on the files are identical in the screenshots because that is when the server was shut down and the MSQL services themselves were shut down, causing the server to update the metadata on all the files to the specific time when the services were shut down. Nothing was, quote, deleted on April 12th, 2021. Maricopa County provided you the actual Dominion server as commanded by your subpoena, and we did not transfer or delete from that server any data from the 2020 general election that was subject to your subpoena. You have now returned that server to us. Evidently, your, quote, auditors made a copy of that server and are conducting their analysis on the copy. The screenshot reveals that your auditors were using RStudio Network Technician to conduct their analysis. That software is used to identify files that are missing at the spot the software is told to search. Yet you provided the screenshot falsely asserting that these identified, quote, missing files were deleted and evidence was, quote, spoiled. Nothing in this screenshot indicates that any file was deleted or spoiled. At most, what can be discerned from this screenshot is that RStudio, as used by your, quote, auditors, did not locate within the copy your vendor created the particular files listed in the column on the right. Still, these files and the database have the ominous red X mark. We cannot say for certain what that mark indicates other than that it likely indicates that RStudio was unable to locate the files. The screenshot does not identify which type of search your, quote, auditors ran, and you conveniently failed to provide the full report the search generated. However, the table at the bottom of the screenshot appears to indicate that certain data is missing because it extends beyond disk bounds of the copied hard drive searched. Perhaps these files have the red X mark because your auditors copied them to a segment of the hard drive that in lay terms is unreadable by the RStudio software, or because your auditors set the RStudio search parameters incorrectly, such that it searched for these files in an area of the hard drive where they do not reside. There could be other explanations as well, including the possibility that your auditors inadvertently or purposefully moved or even deleted certain data. Regardless, the failure of your so-called auditors to locate data files on the copy they made of the county's server speaks more to their ineptitude than it does to the integrity and actions of our dedicated public employees, who effectively and accurately run the elections in the fourth largest county in the United States. Wow, okay. That is pretty pointed. And I guess it's pretty technical. Some of you probably find that easy to get through and figure out. But apparently, the whole accusation that made it all the way up to the level of, or I guess all the way down to the level of the former guy, don't have any basis in reality. What a huge, huge surprise. All right. Let's see. Other items to share with you today. What's this one? Yes. Actually, Greg got to this one. I had put aside that Punch Bowl email newsletter from this morning about speaking to the division within the House Republican Conference over today's voting and the January 6th bill. I guess back on the topic of the January 6th bill, I can't recall exactly what it was that made me put this one aside, but maybe reading through it, it's not that long, will help us figure it out. A USA Today piece, which usually doesn't make it into Pocket unless there's some specific purpose to it. Capitol riot inquiry. January 6th Commission is bipartisan breakthrough, but don't relax yet. I don't think anybody should be relaxing. This is Dennis Aftergut writing as his opinion column for USA Today. Subheader here is Manchin and Sinema are key to preserving democracy. To pass laws ensuring the Capitol Riot Commission can function, we must weaken the filibuster. How do you like that? Making that connection. An introed here by the quote from Archibald MacLeish. Is it MacLeish or MacLeish? I don't know. I'm not that familiar, even though he's a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright and poet. I don't keep up with that and never did, historically or otherwise, so I'm at a disadvantage there. How shall freedom be defended? He asks. By truth when it is attacked by lies. Pretty good. I see why he wins a Pulitzer Prize. Congress is about to take one small step for bipartisanship and one healthy step for truth. It will launch the new National Commission to Investigate the January 6th Attack on the United States Capitol Complex Act. at a hearing on Tuesday. That's done, of course. Just days ago, House Homeland Security Chairman Benny Thompson and Representative John Katko, the committee's senior Republican, announced their agreement to introduce a bipartisan bill. It creates a commission modeled after the 9/11 Commission to investigate the Capitol insurrection, an attack that injured up to 140 people and led to 5 deaths. A violent mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," came within seconds of finding him. The commission will be made up of 10 outside, it says experts, I don't know whether there's any requirement that they be experts, who will examine the facts and causes underlying the January 6th attack and recommend corrective measures to secure the Capitol and our democratic institutions against domestic terrorism. In our tribal times, such an agreement across party lines is remarkable. Representative Andrew Clyde of Georgia, a Donald Trump loyalist, recently called the violent invasion a normal tourist visit. Another Trump loyalist, Paul Gosar of Arizona, described the rioters as peaceful patriots. This brewing revisionist battle over history reminds us of what George Orwell wrote in the novel 1984. That's not underlined or italicized here, so it makes it look like he wrote it in the year 1984, which he did not. His scathing allegory, of course, on totalitarianism. Who controls the past controls the future. In terms of preventing recurring attacks, the 9/11 Commission is the model. Well, it is. I don't know if it ought to be, but it is. It made recommendations that helped the country avoid another 9/11, I guess, establishing the Department of Homeland Security and the screening of all airline passengers. Other countries have also helped create a template. Most famously, this is a sort of an interesting leap from 9/11 Commission to South Africa's Post-Apartheid Truth and Reconciliation Commission under President Nelson Mandela. It helped a police state, white supremacist society transition safely into, safer than it would have been anyway, into a modern democratic era, writes McMaster University professor Bonnie Ibahwo. Oh boy. Ibhawo, I'm guessing, Ibhawoh. In 1990, Chile created a truth commission following the electoral defeat of its brutal dictator, Augusto Pinochet. That commission stripped the military of its control over history. University of Arkansas professor Eric, Weibelhaus-Brahm wrote in his book, Truth Commissions and Transitional Societies. In 1992, following the fall of the Berlin Wall, a unified Germany's legislature created a study commission for working, quote, through the history and consequences of the East German dictatorship. The commission's goal was to solidify democratic consciousness and the further development of a common political culture in Germany. By any measure, that goal has been fully realized. Here, the ultimate success of the January 6th Commission hinges on overcoming several obstacles. First, half the appointments are controlled by the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Both have suggested that a commission should also look into so-called violent demonstrations last summer, reflecting a desire to dilute the focus of January 6th, and McCarthy's continuing fealty to Trump, who cannot be happy about another investigation, casts a long shadow on the potential for politically disinterested probe. Second, under the bill as drafted, it takes a majority of commissioners to issue subpoenas, or agreement between the chair, named by majority Democrats, and vice chair, appointed jointly by McCarthy and McConnell. And even if meaningful subpoenas were to be issued, the bill says the commission must complete its work by December 31st, presumably because Republicans do not want investigations extending into an election year. That timeline creates incentives for reluctant witnesses to delay their compliance with subpoenas. Yeah, that could be a problem. Even though it was McCarthy's complaint that, this could drag on for too long, and it's got an end date written right into the legislation. The remedy for this lies in the Protecting Our Democracy Act. We continue on, which speeds up the ability of Congress to enforce subpoenas. But to pass that bill, Democrats in the evenly split Senate would need Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to support curtailing the filibuster. That would allow them to prevail with a simple majority, their 50 senators and Vice President Kamala Harris, the tiebreaker. another instance in which it becomes necessary. So far, of course, no indication of their interest in doing that either on this or the For the People Act. The two filibuster holdouts hold the key to preserving our democracy, and pressure on them could rise. New polling sponsored by an election reform group found that 79% in West Virginia and 84% in Arizona support the For the People Act. And if it's not passed, even a robust investigation of the January 6th events may not diminish the risk to our government's future. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. There was just a little bit more to that piece, and I guess we can read through the last paragraph or so. We left off just by saying, and we left off a rhetorical flourish here. If it's not passed, if the two filibuster holdouts remain holdouts, despite the new polling, again, that shows 79% in West Virginia, 84% in Arizona supporting the For the People Act, which can't pass without their votes. They don't currently support them, and they certainly can't pass with a simple majority unless something happens to push the filibuster out of the way, whether that's any sort of agreement or actual rules changing and precedent changing activity. But if it's not passed, the For the People Act, even a robust investigation of the January 6th Capitol riots, I'll say, would not diminish the risk of our government's future control by extremists. That's the rhetorical flourish that we wanted to add. Control by extremists, such as those seeking to rewrite history around the insurrection. I mean, this history is not done yet, right? We think we've established what the truth is, but if things somehow go poorly and people who are interested in rewriting that history or otherwise obscuring the truth of that history either retain or gain more power, it's entirely possible that we just simply get to the point where we write in the history books that they were tourists and peaceful patriots, and people in the future just simply read and teach that conclusion instead. And after a while, we all die off, and then you're left with the mythology instead. Anyway, we conclude with this final paragraph. Another hard-to-read name, which I actually happen to know the pronunciation of, though, because this is a history I have paid attention to, as opposed to the history of the Pulitzer Prize. Dag Hammarskjöld, the legendary 1950s United Nations Secretary General, whom President John Kennedy called the greatest statesman of the 20th century, once said the UN was not created to take mankind to heaven, but to save humanity from hell. An independent and empowered January 6th Commission, combined with enactment of the For the People Act and Protecting Our Democracy Acts, can do the same for our republic. Yes, but many things have to happen first. And, of course, that was the focus of part of the piece. Just thought I would put that one on the record and pronounce Dag Hammarskjöld's name remotely correctly, I think. Although I might get some pointers from the Nordic folks who are more familiar with the language, but that's the way we learned it when we learned all about the United Nations way back in 6th grade, I think. I still remember that. It didn't all stick with me, but a lot of it I remember. Okay, let's see. Other stories to share with you. They've got to make some choices here. Some of these things I will save for Thursday and some all the way out to Friday. Can we note for the record, at least, this exciting bit? I wish we had it yesterday when Joan was on. Maybe we'll talk it up a little bit next Tuesday. Feds investigating alleged illegal donations to Susan Collins' re-election bid, according to Lachlan Marquez's piece for Axios. Just want to get a flavor for what's going on there. And they give it to us in bulletized format. The FBI is investigating what it describes as a massive scheme to illegally finance Susan Collins' 2020 re-election bid. Axios has learned. What's happening? Well, let's see. A recently unsealed search warrant application shows the FBI believes a Hawaii defense contractor, this is an election in Maine, Hawaii defense contractor illegally funneled $150,000 to a pro-Collins super PAC and reimbursed donations to Collins' campaign. There's no indication that Collins or her team were aware of any of it. Collins helped the contractor at issue, then called Navatech, and since renamed the Martin Defense Group. She helped them secure an $8 million Navy contract before most of the donations took place. Former Navatech CEO Martin Kao, there's Martin for you, was indicted last year for allegedly bilking the federal government of millions in coronavirus relief funds. So he is a super duper kind of guy, bilking the federal government out of coronavirus relief funds, and then, I guess while working as a defense contractor, and then seeking an $8 million contract from where? From, I don't know, I guess the Department of Defense, and Collins helped them out. Why? They're based in Hawaii. What's her interest? I don't know. They're giving her money. Here's what they're saying. The Collins for Senator campaign had absolutely no knowledge of anything alleged in the warrant. Collins spokesperson Annie Clark told Axios in an emailed statement. Federal prosecutors say Kao, that's K-A-O, used a shell company to funnel $150,000 in Navatech funds to a pro-Collins super PAC called 1820 PAC. According to the FBI, is 1820, by the way, the date of admission to the Union for Maine by any chance? I don't know. The Mainers, do you know? According to the FBI, Kao and his wife set up a sham LLC called the Society for Young Women Scientists and Engineers. Very Ceausescu of them. Navatech then wrote the LLC a $150,000 check, investigators say, which was passed on to the super PAC. Okay, so for some reason, they didn't want Navatech being seen giving the money to a super PAC. But as somebody commented on Twitter about this story yesterday, there's so many easier ways to obfuscate unlimited amounts of money moving to super PACs. It's weird that they did this one this way. Government contractors, of course, are barred from donating to federal political committees, and investigators suspect the donations were an attempt to evade that prohibition. Investigators say bank records also show that Kao illegally reimbursed family members who donated to Collins' campaign, and that Navatech reimbursed some of Kao's colleagues for their contributions. That's known as a straw donation. It's also prohibited by law. The Collins campaign's fundraising solicitations also require donors to certify that they are in fact donating their own funds. So everybody who said they were but isn't is in trouble. They allegedly reimbursed donations came in clusters, according to federal contribution records, between June and September of 2019 and amounted to less than 0.2% of the Collins campaign's total fundraising. So apparently not a huge deal. The warrant application quotes an email exchange between Kao, who had just maxed out to Collins' campaign, and the senator's main finance director. Quote, if you have friends or family members that would be willing to donate, please don't hesitate to send them my way, the Collins staffer wrote. I mean, that's an okay thing to do. The point is that, if those people are willing to donate their own money, then they should go ahead and do so, even if they do so at the urging of Martin Kao, but that would be okay. But his donating, especially donating corporate money, especially corporate money from a federal contractor, and pretending it's their money is the problem. More of a problem for him and his family members than it really is for Susan Collins. She's got her own problems. So maybe best that we get that out of the way. It's on the record. Now we understand the issue behind it. I don't expect a great deal to come of that one. But just so you know, in case you saw the headline and wanted to know what was behind it. Speaking of which, if you were interested in more about what's behind the various headlines, we shared the story the other day of the latest antics involving James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. And I have something from Columbia Journalism Review about another aspect of their activity, which might be of some interest. Before we get to that, though, I will read this bit that Greg forwarded from Kyle Griffin's tweet, the MSNBC producer, telling us a Michigan judge has rejected an effort to force a new audit of the 2020 election results in a county that has been central to lies promoted by Trump and his supporters. The case was one of the last challenges to the 2020 election results, still pending, but I guess judges say to hell with that. And maybe this is to what Trump was referring when he crashed that wedding and said that, many states will be doing what Arizona is doing. States from all over are going to be recounting and auditing their votes, and I guess they aren't going to be doing that. Hadn't heard about this county being in the spotlight, though. The Washington Post reporting on it is headlined, Michigan judge dismisses lawsuit seeking new audit of Antrim. Is it Antrim? Yeah, county vote. One of the last remaining 2020 legal challenges. Rosalind Helderman writes this piece. Doesn't look to be too long. Let's thumb through it. Michigan judge on Tuesday rejected an effort to force a new audit of the 2020 election results in a county that has been central to false claims promoted by Trump and his supporters that the election was stolen. Michigan Circuit Court Judge Kevin Elsenheimer dismissed the case brought by a voter in rural Antrim County who had argued that, quote, material fraud or error, unquote, had taken place in the election and that he was entitled to a new audit of the results under state law. Well, you're not. Go away. The case was one of the last challenges to the November election results still pending in the nation's courts. Its dismissal comes as Trump and his supporters have been pushing to conduct audits around the country in the hopes of uncovering issues they say will support Trump's baseless claims that he defeated President Biden. Trump issued a statement last week referring to the case as the major Michigan election fraud case. Major case. Now, absolutely nothing. Ash heap of history. And highlighting a new filing from the plaintiffs that argued votes had been switched from Trump to Biden. The number of votes is massive, all caps there, massive, and determinative. Someone told them that word. This will prove true in numerous other states, Trump said. But Elsenheimer said, F you, go away. Ruling that a statewide post-election audit conducted by Michigan's Secretary of State's office that concluded in March, which found that the election had been conducted fairly and accurately, was sufficient to satisfy a state law that allows voters to request audits. Okay. So there actually is an entitlement to request audits. That's interesting. But there you go. You can request an audit, but guess what? The judge says, well, there was one, and you lost it. So go away. Because of that, he said the suit was moot. That rhymes. And he granted a motion to dismiss sought by Michigan's Secretary of State and the clerk of Antrim County. During the hearing, Elsenheimer said he was not concluding whether the election data was corrupted or corruptible, a finding that he said was not possible with the information available to him and also not required by law. I am saying that, as pled, the plaintiff's request for an audit is not available, he said. Elsenheimer is among more than 90 state and federal judges who have dismissed challenges to the election results filed by Trump or his allies around the country since Election Day. Today's dismissal of the last of the lawsuits attempting to undermine democracy in furtherance of the big lie affirms that despite incredible scrutiny and an unprecedented effort to deceive, the 2020 election was fair, secure, and the results accurately reflect the will of the people, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson said in a tweet referring to the false claim that the election was stolen. Trump supporters have been focused on Antrim County since an error not long after polls closed in November led the county to briefly report that Joe Biden had defeated Trump by more than 3,000 votes in the heavily Republican area. Election officials quickly established that the issue was caused by human error, saying a clerk's failure to update software just before the election was responsible for the incorrect tally, which was rapidly updated to reflect Trump's victory. I will say, I can see why people might be initially suspicious of something like that. What sort of software update, do you need to do arithmetic correctly? The numbers were still numbers before the software update and still are after. But okay, who knows what sort of bugs are in there. However, Trump and his supporters have insisted that Antrim's initial error might have been a sign of faulty or manipulated machines that cost him votes elsewhere. Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, a Michigan resident, held a news conference in the days after the election where she decried a, quote, major software issue in Antrim County that she said could hold implications for the election in other areas. I guess they're trying to say it was easy to spot in Antrim County because everyone anticipated a Trump win, so they double-checked and found out, oh yeah, right, that's wrong. Whereas in other counties where it may have been the case that Trump was expected to lose or they didn't know what the outcome was going to be, nobody double-checked because it wasn't obviously wrong. I don't know. Anyway, I guess a software update, by the way, could change things. It won't change arithmetic, but if in the old software you were supposed to take everything from column A and add it to everything in column B, and in the new software you're supposed to be adding columns C and D, I guess you could see that there would be a problem from that. Local resident William Bailey filed his suit on November 23rd. In early December, Elsenheimer, a former Republican state lawmaker, ordered that a private firm based in Texas that was working with Bailey be given access to the county's voting machines to examine them for possible problems, creating excitement for Trump just as he was trying to challenge certification of Biden's win. So they almost went down the Arizona path on this. The firm, Allied Security Operations Group, produced a report within days that asserted a vast conspiracy to rig the election. But an expert analysis of the report, conducted on behalf of the Michigan Attorney General and Secretary of State, found it was riddled with inaccuracies. And a subsequent hand recount of Antrim's presidential ballots confirmed that the county's voting machines had tabulated the results accurately. So that ought to settle things for that. By the way, Allied Security Operations Group sounds like vaguely familiar, but I mean it's such a generic name. I'm just sort of curious. Actually, I was thinking that we'd heard the name before somehow, and that maybe it was something that had changed its name from one week to the next. I don't know, but I guess not. I'll poke around and see. Now I'm very curious about who they are and what they do and what relation they may have to cyber ninjas beyond just being weirdos willing to put themselves out there to conduct these fake audits. All right, let's see. I mentioned the further information from Columbia Journalism Review on Project Veritas and what James O'Keefe was up to. Is this a huge, long thing or what? I might be able to fit this in the time we've got left. Columbia Journalism Review, once again, Bill Gruskin writing this piece, A Matter of Opinion, Project Veritas, the New York Times, and a bitter defamation suit. We haven't been paying much attention to the outcome of that suit, but here's an update on what's going on and backgrounder on it. In a New York Supreme Court last November, and remember, you may never have known why that weird phrasing. In a New York Supreme Court last November, the highest appellate court in New York State is not called the Supreme Court. Actually, I think that's just the Court of Appeals. But the Supreme Court, for whatever reason, historical reason, is actually the lowest courts where you can bring a case. I don't know why they just do it upside down. And in a way, it's sort of like, well, this is the Supreme Court of Justice here. Everybody has access to this. Is where the, most business before the courts is conducted. All business begins here. So therefore, for that reason, it's pretty supreme. I don't know. what exactly was the thinking on that, but sometimes that fools people, and that's why you get something like this in a New York Supreme Court, because there are several. Anyway, last November, the conservative website Project Veritas launched its defamation suit against the New York Times in much the same way that Veritas's founder, James O'Keefe, launches his viral videos, with a fusillade of accusations. Among the many allegations listed in the suit, an attempt to show that Times reporter Maggie Astor was biased against conservatives because she, quote, was once interviewed by the New York Sun while wearing a shirt that said, "I hated Bush before it was cool." Okay, now that isn't wrong, although Veritas's lawyers leave out the fact that this happened more than 13 years ago when Astor was a first-year student at Barnard College. Quite different, don't you think? The Times is being sued because of how it characterized two Veritas videos, which ran last September and alleged voter fraud in Minneapolis. Astor's story, as quoted in the suit, called a Veritas video deceptive and said O'Keefe and his colleagues have a long history of releasing manipulated or selectively edited footage. I mean, all of this is true, right? I mean, they don't think so, but we do. Astor noted that Veritas released its first video just hours after a big Times scoop about Donald Trump's tax returns, and she quoted an academic research group saying that a series of Veritas promoting tweets by Trump and others resembled a coordinated disinformation campaign. To many journalists, those statements would seem uncontroversial, the litigation a nuisance. But Veritas recently scored an important win when a New York justice rebuffed the Times' efforts to get the suit dismissed. That means the Times, which has appealed the ruling, may now face a protracted court battle, and each side could soon be imposing onerous discovery and depositions on the other's reporters and editors. Veritas filed its suit in the New York Supreme Court, a trial court whose justices hear cases on a county level. In this case, Westchester County, a New York City suburb where Veritas's office is located, not his houseboat. And there's evidence that the suit was a hot potato. Two Supreme Court justices, including Alexandra Murphy, the daughter of New York State's chief judge, quickly recused themselves without providing a rationale. The decision in the Veritas case got little notice in mainstream or progressive media. Even the Times didn't mention it, but it was enthusiastically covered in conservative outlets such as The Federalist and The Washington Examiner. A Twitter-banned Trump took to video so he could congratulate Veritas on its win. Whatever you can do for their legal defense fund, we're with them all the way. They do incredible work. The Times isn't Veritas's only target these days. Last month, O'Keefe filed a defamation suit against Twitter after it kicked him off the platform, while Veritas filed another defamation suit against CNN. This is their new business model, you can see. The Times, in its response to the lawsuit, argued that Astor and another defendant, reporter Tiffany Sue, HSU, were either telling readers the truth or were putting unverifiable expressions of opinion into their news stories. And that last bit is a handy term among media lawyers, the idea being that since most opinions can't be proved true or false, they can't serve as the basis of a defamation suit. As Times spokeswoman Danielle Rhodes-Ha told me, the term opinion has a special meaning in defamation law, one that differs from the common understanding of the term, adding that it refers to descriptive statements that help readers understand the significance of the news. That might be like an important function of news reporting. In that sense, you could say that the Times is portraying opinion as something closer to analysis or color, like when a sports writer says the ball game was played on a beautiful day rather than reporting it was 74 degrees, or describes the shortstop as clumsy instead of noting that he made 3 errors. If that was the distinction, it was lost on the justice in the case, Charles D. Wood, who was elected to a 14-year term as a Republican in 2009. Wood noted Veritas's argument that a reasonable reader would expect a news reporter's statements to be assertions of fact and not opinion. He added, if a writer interjects an opinion in a news article and will seek to claim legal protections as opinion, it stands to reason that the writer should have an obligation to alert the reader. By framing his decision that way, Wood highlighted the key irony of the case. A court is pointing to Project Veritas as a possible victim of unethical journalistic conduct. Meanwhile, the New York Times must counter the blowback that comes from arguing that its reporters put opinion, however it's defined, into its news stories. The Veritas piece at the heart of the Times case opens with a Snapchat video featuring a man named Liban Mohammed, also known as Liban Osman, speaking in Somali and English, to no one in particular, about absentee ballots he had collected on behalf of his brother, Jamal Osman, a local municipal candidate. His car is littered with envelopes, and he is seen saying, just today we got 300 for Jamal Osman. It isn't clear from the video what's in the envelopes, or when this was shot, or who was behind whatever was going on. The video then cuts to another Somali man in Minnesota, Omar Jamal, who serves as Veritas's key on-the-record source. Some of Jamal's quotes leave a lot to the imagination. Here's how one of Veritas's subtitles reads, with its parentheses, not mine. I think he, parens, Liban Mohammed, was, parentheses, working for both Ilhan Omar and Jamal, parentheses, Osman, but I think he was more with Ilhan Omar, referring to the Democratic congresswoman from Minneapolis. So what's actually quoted is, let's see. I think he was both Ilhan Omar and Jamal, but I think he was more with Ilhan Omar. That doesn't really mean very much. Mohammed at one point is seen saying, a campaign is managed by money. You cannot campaign with $200 or $100 you got from your grandmother or grandfather. You got to have fundraisers. Most politicians would fully agree. There's more in this vein. An unnamed ballot harvester, quote-unquote ballot harvester, with a pixelated face makes allegations about Ilhan Omar's campaign. An unnamed and unseen, quote, former political worker, talks about taking absentee ballots from voters. Someone identified as, quote, Jamal, member, unquote, of the state's Democratic Party, says that several ballots were returned blank. In another Snapchat scene, Mohammed says to a woman in Somali, there are winners and losers, right? And she responds, yes, they will win with the Japanese. But there's no indication of who the Japanese are or what their relevance might be. Throughout, videos are cut and spliced together in ways that make it difficult to tell what has been independently verified. In other words, standard product from Project Veritas. The video, nevertheless, was a sensation on the right. Then President Trump blasted out his endorsement. This is totally illegal. As did his son Don Jr. and a host of other conservative activists. That video and another one by Veritas released the next day came under scrutiny by mainstream news outlets, some of which wrote that Veritas's work was shoddy. A USA Today analysis stated that a fact-check column that was based on our research, the claim that Project Veritas discovered a voter fraud scheme connected with Ilhan Omar is false, adding that there are many aspects that are impossible to corroborate. Snopes, the fact-checking site, said Veritas was spreading an unfounded claim about Omar and voter fraud. Meanwhile, the local Fox affiliate in Minneapolis interviewed Mohammed, the man with the envelopes in his car, and quoted him as saying he was offered $10,000 by Jamal to claim he was collecting ballots for Representative Omar. Veritas denies that. So you can see how this is shaping up, but at least in the background. But what's really interesting is the position that it's put the Times in, and one having to defend itself by saying, well, yeah, we have to admit some of this is definitely opinion, but it doesn't rise to the level that we would have to label the entire article as being an opinion piece. That is an interesting way of describing it and saying it's really more like color commentary than anything else. But of course they'll seize on, and I guess that's the whole thing, is that Project Veritas has found a friendly judge, which is problematic. Found a friendly judge in New York who's willing to say, aha, you said the word opinion. And it's kind of I guess loosely analogous to the argument that, National Socialists was the original full name of the Nazi Party. Therefore, Nazis were socialists, and today's leftists are, in fact, the inheritors of the Nazi legacy, which is, of course, upside down and backwards and based on a child's understanding of semantics. Unfortunately, this child has been elected to a 14-year term in the New York State Supreme Court. It is the lowest court in the state, and so there's plenty of opportunity for appeals courts to throw this out. But I guess Columbia Journalism Review, it falls to them to note for the record that this is happening and will stand as the law until reversed later on. There's much more to the article. I encourage you to take a look at it. Just wanted you to know that was going on in the background. Now, time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy to find out what else is going on, background and foreground.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, more on that New York Attorney General opening of the criminal investigation into the Trump Organization, plus the House GOP trying to weaken Capitol security and build Trump's wall. Instead, Biden now has restored legal aid for low-income and minority Americans that was shut down under Trump. That, too, a positive development. More after this.